So, nearly every problem in Phantasy Star Online comes from scientists going a bit too far in their research, and a perfect example of this is the mines, which were constructed to advance humanity's curiosity into the world of Ragol. With the disappearance of everybody aboard Pioneer 1, all that remained were more questions, and the people of Pioneer 2 wanted answers. But one character had a much more personal reason for looking into what humanity was planning, a Newman named Sue. When you first meet her, Sue is as surrounded in mystery as the mines themselves, but looking into everything we learn about her, both in and out of the game, reveals one of the most underappreciated characters in Phantasy Star Online. In the first part of this series, we learned about her association with Black Paper and how she often works with Karik, their lead executioner. But today, let's take a look at why Sue boarded Pioneer 2, how she changes throughout the game, and if she manages to uncover humanity's plans for the future. Much like Karik, we can learn about Sue's backstory in the Material Collections book before we start the game, though there's actually another page we need to look at first. If we go to this page, the Keywords of Ragol, it gives us a little more context into Sue's story. The first section we're looking for is everyone's favorite topic, race relation. In case you didn't know this, androids and Newman were both artificially created by humanity. Humans are seen with the most social status, but the one place all three races are viewed the most equally is the Hunters Guild. And in particular, a lot of Newmans become hunters because, for one reason or another, they've lost their homes. Let's move on to the next section, Experiment Code. This talks about the three AI systems that were developed on Pioneer 1, Volopt, Calus, and Olga. And this is only speculation, but some people believe that each system was created for something beyond just system operation. A theory that gets thrown out there is that these are more advanced versions of emotional AI, which was technology developed back on Corral, which resulted in the creation of Mags. So that was a bit of groundwork to cover, but it'll all be brought up bit by bit later on. Now, let's see what the book has to say about Sue herself. She was an orphan who was taken into Black Paper at a very young age, and her experience has given her quite a bit of power within the organization. But the reason for Sue being an orphan is because of the unstable lifespan that Newmans have, and they're still considered an imperfect species. Rather than let this reality keep her down though, she uses this as the reason to come to Ragol. She wants to see for herself what new life forms are out there, and because of her connections in Black Paper, she's more easily able to conduct these investigations. At the end of the day, she doesn't agree with the actions of Black Paper, but it's the only way she can try to learn the truth. And that is where we come into play. At this point in the game, the player has quite a few quests under their belt, including a run-in with Black Paper's executioner. Thankfully, it was a simple job and had nothing to do with his actual profession. So now, we're asked by a group of scientists to recover some data that was left deep in the mines. This data is from a certain Dr. Osto, who developed the three AI systems we talked about earlier, that may have been created for something beyond just system operation. So you can imagine there are a few parties that are interested in this data. Shortly into the investigation, you happen to come across someone else in the mines as well, but any chance of cooperation with the black-clad hunter is cut short by him saying he has orders to kill you. Oh well. The man has some choice words after you show him what's what, and the way ahead is clear, though things just got a little bit darker. Not a few minutes into the mines and there was an attempt made on your life. Whoever else is down here looking for Dr. Osto's research is willing to murder innocent hunters to get it. It isn't too long before you come face to face with another hunter, and this time it's the Newman of the hour. You do a good job startling her by coming up from behind, but at least she's not raising that claw of hers against you. In fact, Sue is quick to accept any help in whatever she's doing down here, so for the time being the two of you start working together. Sue doesn't really say why she's down in the mines, but at least tells you this is her first visit. Later on in the journey, she opens up a little more and says she got separated from a friend of hers. And speaking of, there's a third black-clad hunter down here you come across. This appears to be the friend Sue brought up, as he recognizes her traveling with you and promptly leaves it at that. After carving your way through more waves of robots, the two of you reach your destination. Thanks to the handy disk you got from the scientists, you're able to access the files with Dr. Osto's credentials on them and start making a backup. This includes the information on the mines, excavation attempts, and an experiment named Beta 772. All of this comes as a shock to Sue, who just witnessed you easily accessing all of the exact information she's looking for. She stops herself from asking who you're affiliated with and just ends up wanting a copy of the same information. So that's the end of the quest. Sue clearly got everything she needed, but she's gonna go off on her own to find her friend. Before she departs, she asks to know your name, and like any good Samaritan that wants to stay on the good timeline, you tell her, and off she goes. You can actually find her friend before leaving, and he gives you a less than friendly warning about the information you came across. This may be a controversial opinion, but if it weren't for Sue traveling with you, this guy probably would have made an attempt on your life. The next time we see Sue is actually not too long after. The scientists on Pioneer 2 took a very keen interest in one of Dr. Osto's experiments, Beta 772, so one of them asks to accompany you back to the mines to locate it. The good news is that nobody is looking to kill you now that a Pioneer 2 scientist is with you. The neutral news is, hey, Sue's down here again continuing her investigation. And the bad news is that she's not happy to see you still looking into the same things she is. While she doesn't threaten you like seemingly everyone else down here, she gives you a stern warning. Dr. Osto's research is now being investigated by Black Paper, and continuing to get involved will catch the attention of their executioner. Sue then goes off on her own, but it's not too long before you find someone else down here. This enigmatic man may look familiar, but he's not here to catch up with you. In fact, he saw you talking with Sue and wants to know what exactly she said to you. Relaying the information to him, the man tells you more about what Black Paper does and this black hound that she mentioned. He doesn't stick around for long after, but he gives you a warning of his own. Sue is a member of Black Paper. Of course, we already knew this, but in-game this would have been the first time it was officially brought up. So let's take a step back for a second. In the span of only a couple quests, you've gotten involved in the business of a black market organization, survived a murder attempt from said organization, directly worked with a member of said organization, and are now on their radar for sticking your nose in too deep. This is absolutely not a good situation to be in. So let's do a few more quests where we interview with Black Paper and survive a few more assassination attempts from them and see what happens. We also wouldn't be doing Dr. Osto justice if we didn't go through all the findings about Beta 772. It initially looked similar to a centipede, but started to grow rapidly in size after absorbing the cells of other animals. In fact, it grew so big that during an attempt to move it, it went on a murderous rampage and fled into a drain pipe. As for what it looks like now, it's this guy. Great job, Dr. Osto. It takes a little bit before we meet Sue again, and this time she's right on Pioneer 2. You catch her off guard, assumingly because of how some of her friends have tried to murder you. And in one of the ballsiest choices ever, you ask her face to face about Black Paper, knowing damn well she's a part of it. Sue entertains the question far enough to tell you the same things you already know, and makes a quick exit right after. Let's not think too hard about the implications of your actions and the danger you're putting yourself in. Our next encounter with Sue is on the aptly named quest, Black Paper. She's on Pioneer 2 again, and her friend is only a few meters away keeping an eye on you. She's also a bit more rattled than before since you continue to shrug off threats and attacks from the organization she's in. She does open up a little bit more this time though, and says her purpose for being here is conducting personal research on what's living below the surface. That's just about all she says this time, and she makes her leave right after. Her friend is still keeping an eye on you, though he doesn't have much to say. Depending on what actions you take after this, Sue will appear in another quest where she talks to two characters, Dr. Montague and his assistant. Sue and Montague clearly have some history going back to their home planet, and Sue then cuts to the chase. She brings up how his name was mentioned in Dr. Osto's research, and something about a plan from the military only referred to as the M plan. The subject then changes to, well, you. Up to this point, there have been other quests where you've helped out Montague and his assistant, and the two of them praise your efforts. She appears to concede this point and moves on to talk about the military's recent actions below the surface. Montague has tried to tell them to back off due to the unknown dangers beneath Ragol, and Sue brings up a certain Leo Grawhart before heading toward the teleporter. And finally, both Sue and Montague seem to understand that whatever lies below the mines is not to be taken lightly. And that's how things end for Episode 1. There are quite a few unknowns up in the air, like the AI systems Dr. Osto developed, Sue's own investigation, and what will happen to you after making an enemy of Black Paper. While we won't see her again until episode 2, there is one more optional quest we can do to better lay the groundwork of what's to come. The quest named Knowing One's Heart features a girl named Ellie and a pen pal she had on the surface. He stopped messaging her after the explosion on Ragol, but just recently started to communicate with her again. I should mention that the name of this pen pal is Calus, as in one of the AI systems that Dr. Osto worked on. But us English players don't know that, so let's get back down to the mines. As the two of you navigate through the mines, the messages she receives from Calus become very capricious. It turns from staticky warnings to turn back, to simply joking about that, and he's totally just fine. This goes back and forth for a while until you make it to the door he's behind, and the grand reveal is he's a machine. And a machine that's been infected by something. Whatever is inside his system wants him to seek out a physical form, and at this rate he's going to be fully taken over. He's happy to know that Ellie is safe, but has no choice but to permanently shut down to stop the virus. Just before that happens though, Ellie makes a backup of Calus, and that's how the quest ends. A very traditional ending to a quest in Phantasy Star Online, where things are just kinda crap. Right, now we're on to episode 2 with a quest named Seat of the Heart. Ellie is back, and this time she wants your help taking a hunter adaptation exam. If you didn't do all the quests with Sue and had those encounters with her, she won't show up here. And thankfully, you can tell early on whether or not that's the case. You see, the AI that's overseeing this exam is a reconstruction of the backup of Calus that Ellie took. So, knowing the instability of this backup, the Pioneer 2 lab asks for a certain 2 individuals to keep an eye on how Calus reacts to Ellie. Those 2 are none other than Sue and Karik, the former clearly having a personal investment here due to Calus being a system that Dr. Osto developed. A few things definitely happen during the exam. The two of you make good progress, but Cal starts to make his presence known in the simulation in human form, and the infected part of him shows up as well, becoming the first to interact with Ellie directly as the exam is supposed to finish. He starts to sweet-talk her for a little bit, but the real Cal shows up after, warning her not to interact with him. But the infected Cal wins out, at least this time, as Ellie is convinced to download both versions of him into her navigation system. With the two of you back in the real world, one of the Cals starts to talk with her. He wants you to go to the central control tower as soon as possible, as he can't guarantee how long this part of him will remain him. So that's what you're working with for the time being, but don't forget that this whole thing was being overseen by the lab, and more importantly, Sue. By the way she reacts to these events, it sounds like the lab's director was aware that the reconstructed Cal would push Ellie to go to the central control tower, and she's not too happy about it. You use the teleporter to make it there, though it's supposed to be off limits for most hunters, and Cal is still staying strong. So off you go to the tower. That said, the two of you aren't alone, and that's going to be made very clear very soon. The tower is just in sight, and the way ahead is cleared before both Cals materialize and things get a little bit out of hand. This is where the good Cal drops the unfortunate truth that they are, in fact, just a reconstruction of the Cal that she knew. But evil Cal still insists he cares for her and promises he will have a real physical form once they make it to the tower. You hoof it on your own for a bit to open the way to the tower, and just as you're about to make it back up to Ellie, she gets ambushed by Sue and Karik. The Black Hound is silent, but Sue politely asks you to come up so you can all have a nice chat. The warm reunion doesn't last long, and Sue officially denies either of you entry into the control tower. Going along with the plan of a reconstructed, unstable AI is definitely not a good idea, so she wants to put an end to this. And that goes for you as well. But if you know anything about our line of decision making, you know that we're very keen on getting way too involved in things. Just as you and Sue are about to fight, Karik finally steps in. He wants to use this opportunity to see how much stronger you've become since you first met. Sue is less than enthralled at the idea, but she has no choice but to relent and let the Black Hound have his fun. So she stays behind to keep an eye on Ellie, while the two of you have an epic fighting montage on your way through the tower. Once you reach the top, Karik lays down a telepipe so Sue and Ellie can join you. It's here that we meet the AI administrator of the tower, named Delta, and Sue is finally able to get some answers. Ellie has a hard time taking all of this in, but Cal is able to temporarily reawaken to talk with her one last time. They share a heartfelt goodbye, and Cal returns to digital primordial soup, one day to evolve into a new form of life. Delta then promptly kicks us out, and you awaken by yourself on the beach. Now, if you ever want to play along and you get to this point, do yourself a favor and don't go directly forward. If you look closely, you can see Sue watching you from a nearby rock, and taking the warp nearby brings you up there to talk with her. She heads out, Karik hints that things aren't quite over yet, and that's how things end for episode 2. Overall, it's a win for everyone. You're no longer on Black Paper's radar, and Sue doesn't hate you. But you know what really sucks about all this? Is, for us English players, we never got the backstory of Sue readily available, so we had no idea why she was so invested in this research. That's finally been fixed though, so the full story is visible to us. Coming to Ragol and conducting all this research and investigation, it led to this moment, and Sue has finally found some of the answers she's been looking for. Humanity's next step in evolution is real, and it's actively progressing thanks to Cal and Delta. So maybe now, Sue can finally have some closure on what she spent a long time dedicating her life to. And this brings us to episode 4, over a year later in the game's story. All of the business about Dr. Osto's research is seemingly wrapped up, but Sue and Black Paper are about to get involved in another investigation. This time it involves the military, definitely not shooting down a meteor and having it crash into the surface of Ragol. A research team loses contact with Pioneer 2 after approaching the crater, so we're asked to take a look. And it doesn't take long before we spot her, once again investigating on her own. Sue is absolutely not surprised to see you back at it, though she doesn't have any reason to think that you're working with the military here. She also doesn't appear to know much about the research team, but in normal fashion she gives you a warning about getting too involved. You'll only be putting yourself in more danger as you look further into this. Doesn't that sound familiar? She may actually be right though. Several members of the military show up as you close in on the crater and they block it off. Nobody is willing to hear you out about the missing research team, so you've got no choice but to return to Pioneer 2. And just as we're about to make our exit, the camera shows Sue and Karik nearby. The conversation they have is a little cryptic, but the two of them are beginning to suspect some bad intentions with all this. It also sounds like Sue has a personal investment in whatever the heck is going on. As the story continues, it becomes very clear that the military does indeed have some nefarious plans in the works. And as Dr. Montague here puts it, it's a bit complicated to put together. This all goes back to the emotional AI project that initially resulted in the creation of mags. Humanity then took this research a step further into other forms of life, which created both androids and Numans. The military took a keen interest in how this emotional AI could be used and thus wanted a singular system to control each facet of it. The result of this was the Mother Project that we briefly saw in episode 2, but despite its failure, a faction of the military named Works hasn't given up on it. This brings in a new character named Rupika, who is a Numan like Sue. Rupika is a bit special in that her DNA is infused with the same raw genes that created emotional AI, and you can probably guess what just so happened to be on the meteor that the military shot down. So that's the situation. Works wants to bring Rupika to the core of the meteor so her DNA can interact with it and ideally create their own mother project so they can control the emotional AI. Needless to say, using a Newman to try and force the next step of evolution is more than enough to get Sue's attention. The military does end up bringing Rupika close to the site, but Karik and Sue step in to take her back. If you remember the name Leo Grahart that Sue brought up in episode 1, he's revealed to be the leader of Works who is spearheading this operation. The two Newmans have a brief conversation and Sue is just glad to have saved her before it was too late. Rupika is then told to stay hidden as the two of them talk amongst themselves, learning what Works was planning to use her for. Sue makes it a strong point to make sure Rupika is no longer seen as a tool just because of the DNA that she has. That said, she was already brought close enough to the meteor core that she feels it resonating within her, so she leaves her hiding spot just to get closer to it. Karik is still staying calm about this whole ordeal, but the same can't be said about his partner. The potential impact this would have on not just the military, but how emotional AI will evolve is putting her on edge, and things reach a breaking point as she's calling out for Rupika deep within the crater. The pep talk from Karik helps bring her back on track, though there isn't much that can be done at this point. Rupika is brought directly above the meteor, but instead of being able to control the power in it, it instead overcomes her. When you make your way down to the core, you can only watch as Rupika's being interacts with it and seemingly awakens this giant sandworm. I still don't know if Rupika is this thing, or awakens it, or creates it. Regardless, it's a big boss and it needs to be taken out, so you need to do what you do best. Thankfully, Rupika returns to her original form after the monster is defeated and Sue is there to wake her up. But the events of this episode have really soured Rupika's opinion on, well, life. She now sees her existence as a curse and goes so far as to wish that she had never been born. But that's when Sue cuts in and promptly puts an end to those thoughts. Sue convinces Rupika that she can live a normal life now, and with a hearty laugh had by all, episode 4 ends. And this also ties a nice bow on Sue's story, as this is how it concludes as well. So looking back on everything, what can we say about Sue as a character? This may sound a little weird, but after reading her bio in the Material Collections book, I couldn't help but feel a little miffed. Up until now, I didn't realize why she was so personally invested in Dr. Osto's research or saving Rupika from the military. This one piece of the puzzle gave so much context to her words and actions, and it was never officially shared outside of Japan. But at the very least, we can now seek it out ourselves and understand her a whole lot more. Sue is another one of the many cases of the game not directly sharing everything about a character. And it makes sense realistically. I mean, how many people in the real world share their stories with complete strangers? But it comes at the cost of not fully being able to appreciate her as a character. Sue is one of an entire race of people that were artificially created by humans, but their unstable lifespan means her time could be a lot more limited than most. Despite that, she worked her way through the ranks of Black Paper and made her way onto Pioneer 2, all in pursuit of finding out what the future of evolution is. Her dialogue at the end of episode 2 especially has so much more weight with that in mind. Unlike Karik, whose story can mostly be understood within the game itself, Sue isn't so lucky. But going into PSO knowing her history and her goal, a whole new level of appreciation can be attained. Sue doesn't really grow as a character, but she finally got the answers she was looking for and was able to help someone else gain a new appreciation for life. So by that metric, I'd say she did pretty damn well. While Sue doesn't appear in episode 3, her teammate Karik makes a brief appearance and Black Paper is brought up in a single line of dialogue. Even though this takes place 20 years later, maybe Sue is still out there looking for more answers. But at the very least, she does make an appearance in the PSO2 card game, where it looks like she's back in the mines where we first met her. You wanna know what else I think though? Take a look at this artwork celebrating the 3-year anniversary of Blue Burst. There's a cake ready for everyone, but there's only one person who's actually looking at the cake and ready to dig in. Clearly this means Sue retires from Black Paper and becomes a gourmet, learning to love eating all sorts of